Let's look at number 7. 5/6 compared to 1/3. Now I notice that 5/6 is not quite a whole, and I notice that 1/3 is not quite 0. So we can use that information to help us compare. 5/6 is only one piece away from 6/6. In fact, it's really close to that whole. And 1/3 is only one piece away from 0, and so I know that 1/3 is closer to 0 than the whole. So I can use that line of reasoning to figure out that 5/6 is greater than 1/3. And I did that without even using fraction bars or drawing a picture. If you still need to draw a picture or you want to double check your work, please feel free. You can also use fraction pieces if you have them. I'm going to justify my reasoning with words and explain how I came to my answer. Five six is close to one whole. And 1/3 is only one piece away from 0. So 5/6 is greater. Let's look at number 8. 2/8 compared to 11/12. All right, the same thing. I'm looking and I see 2 pieces out of 8 pieces. I know that is really pretty close to 0. And 11/12, that is almost a whole. It is only one piece away from becoming 12/12. So I can tell that 11/12 is close to a whole. 2/8 is actually closer to 0, so 2/8 is less than 11/12. And that's what I'll write for my reasoning. 2/8 is close to 0. And 11/12 is close to one whole. Two eighths is less than 11/12. All right, let's go ahead and look at the back side now. So this page can look a little confusing at first. It's important to really make sure you're reading it, taking it one step at a time. You may need to draw pictures or number lines. Again, use fraction pieces. Feel free to use tools that you can if you need them. Let's take a look at number 9. It says, is 8/10 closer to 0 or a whole? And so in my head, I'm thinking that about the pieces, I'm thinking about the size of the pieces. These are tenths, and if I have 8 of those pieces, that's a lot of pieces. In fact, 10 of the pieces makes a whole, so I know that 8/10 is closer to a whole. It's 8 pieces away from 0. It's only 2 pieces away from the whole. So I can just put my answer down as a 1. And then down here, this is what I just went through in my line of thinking, is that 8/10 is 8/10 away from 0. It's the 8 pieces away from 0. And it's 2 pieces away from a whole. So we call those pieces tenths. So I could say it's 2/10 away from the whole. Let's go on to number 10. Let's try another one. Is 2/6 closer to 0 or a whole? So I'm thinking about sixths, and if I only have 2 of those pieces, am I closer to 0 or closer to the whole? And if you'd like to, if it helps you to answer this part first, you can certainly do that. So I know that 2/6 is 2/6 away from 0. That's the same as saying it's 2 pieces away from 0. And then I know that it is 4 pieces away from a whole. So it's 4/6 away from the whole. So if I was to draw a number line, and this might be what you have to do on a different piece of paper, if this is confusing, feel free to draw your own picture. But I know that if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 2/6 would be right here, and I can easily see that it is a lot closer to 0 than to the whole. And so that is my answer, is that 2/6 is closer to 0. Again, if it helps you to draw a picture, please continue drawing pictures. It will get easier as we go, but for now you might still need the help visualizing what these fractions really look like. Why don't you go ahead and go through number 16 and then restart the video, and we'll talk about number 17. Welcome back to number 17. The question says, is 60 hundredths closer to 0 or 1 whole? And that is a new denominator for us to have hundredths. So that can be a little tricky to visualize, 60 pieces out of 100 pieces. But you can use all sorts of your fraction number sense to figure that out. We can also draw number lines. So I'll show you a couple of ways to think about it with a fraction number line. I know that I do not want to have to draw 100 little tick marks, although I could. A shorter way to think about it would be to change perhaps to tenths and think about if 10 tens equal 1 whole, I could split my number line into 10 pieces just to start with. And then that gives me a starting place. And so I know that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that would be 10 hundredths. And then if I keep going, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20 hundredths. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. That's 30 hundredths. Do you see the pattern? We can go ahead and just finish without having to draw all of those little tick marks. And I can see that 60 hundredths is past the halfway point. And that's really when we have 60 hundredths, if you think about what is half of 100, 50 is half of 100. So 50 hundredths is this halfway point right here. So 60 hundredths is closer to the whole than it is to 0. Another way to think about it, those of you who like counting your money, if you know quarters really well, that's another way that you could split your number line up. I know that if I have 1 quarter, I have 25 cents. If I have 2 quarters, I have 50 cents. If I have 3 quarters, that's 75 cents. And then, of course, 4 quarters is 100 cents. So what essentially we're doing with quarters is that we have 4 parts to the dollar, or 4 quarters make a dollar. And so if I have 4 pieces, I can label that like I would with money. So I'm going to split it in half, and then we have So this would be like saying 25 cents out of 100, or in other words, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and then 4/4, 100 hundredths. And using the number line, I can still estimate that 60 would be maybe somewhere around here. And so I am past that halfway point, so it is closer to the whole. Now, if we wanted to do this problem without having to draw all of that, we can just look at the numerator and again, try to identify, is it over halfway to 100? If I have 10 pieces, I'm closer to 0. 20 pieces, closer to 0. As I get closer to 100, if I get 60 pieces, then I am past the halfway point. 50 100ths would be the halfway point. So I can answer these questions, and that can also help you to solve this. 60 hundredths is 60 pieces away from 0. And then I'll have to do some quick mental math here. 100 100ths. So what's 100 subtract 60? 100 subtract 60 is 40. So I am 40 100ths away from 1. So it is definitely closer to 1 whole. All right, let's take a look at number 18. So I recognize 25 is a money number. It's a quarter. 25 100ths. Is that closer to 0 or closer to a whole? If I bring back my number lines from the last problem, I can see that 20 hundredths is right here. 25 would be about right here. Same thing here with my quarters. So I'm much closer to 0 than I was on that last problem. And I'd have to jump clear over here to the whole. So I'm very much closer to 0. So we're 25 100ths away from 0. And if you do some mental math again, what's 100 take away 25? That's 75. So 75 100ths away from 1 whole. So 25 hundredths is closer to 0.